another variety, and time may work. You need to observe, but you can use time as a form of separation with varieties. One of the problems here, though, is that there are a lot of gardeners, and if not right here where it's so obvious, is 2 doors down from where you live. So that some of these isolation methods might be more difficult in this environment. Oh, one last thing before some questions is storage. Cool, dry, dark is typical for storage. And one of the things I read in Seed to Seed here is just a funny formula. If you sum the humidity and the temperature, it don't exceed 100. But really what you're talking about is dry but not too dry, and cool. So, and there are some long-term storage where you actually can freeze seed. Some people choose to freeze seed. But if you're going to freeze your seed, make sure it's really dry. If you freeze like a cucurbit that's not fully dry, you know, you're going to destroy it. Same as if it's too wet and going to mold. One of the things I learned at the seed saving workshop up in Decorah at Seed Savers Exchange this year was that if you have a house that most houses, if you find a cool, you know, a dark corner, most houses, you know, with the way we keep our temperature control and humidity control, are pretty good for saving seed. Now we're not talking about, you know, the big archives, but for what we're doing, you're going to be able to carry your seed just by keeping it. I'm keeping my bin in the basement. I've typically kept my stuff in a bin because a lot of things for instance, I'll keep in, you know, an airtight container. I'll put my seeds that I buy, and I categorize them by what kind of greens or cucurbits or roots and such. I just ziplock them in a bag where I can see the little pretty picture. That's just a method of mine, but I have to put them in a bin because if you don't, you're going to find a mouse just thinks that's great stuff, and they'll go reorganize it. Your beans that I saved, so I put them in a container and with a label, you know, and you want to label everything. You know, this is bush dry beans, Jacob cattle. It originally came from Garden City Seeds. Harvest location was Ekalaka, Montana in 2006, and I circled heirloom here. So you want to put information on your label about what you have. If you know that you took effort to save that line, you know, just go ahead and remark about that. It's another dry bean called Norwegian brown. You know, there's a lot of different dry beans. And my remarks on this one, from Garden City Seed, 1999, note, plant not caged and grown with other varieties nearby. The isolation distance for a dry bean is something like 200 feet. You know, you look in books, there's a lot of controversy. And I had other beans blooming, and bees like legumes. And so I wrote that, because I know that this is, you know, maybe had some cross-pollination. So that's all you know, you don't, just be honest about it. You know, that's what it is. Whereas this Jacob's cattle, it was the only bean I grew. And I knew no one was growing dry beans around me for over a mile. So it's pretty isolated where I was living. So I worked to my advantage. So just label what you've done, and then it'll always be there. And one of the remarks, and I haven't thought about this, that I heard it up in Seed Savers Exchange. The guy said, if you find that you have a variety that you've been saving for some time, a lot of the seeds that they have acquired, the varieties of heirlooms, have come because somebody's come and said, this was my Uncle George's favorite tomato. Well, what ends up happening is sometimes they would come with it. I don't know what this is, but, you know, Grandma had a whole bunch of seeds. But what is it? And so, not only label, but he says, for me, I have problems with penmanship. write on it for someone else to read, because if you've been carrying something and you pass on, who's going to take it? I mean, how can they tell what you've done? So it's just something that caught my interest, to be mindful. If you are into passing on, be mindful that you're not the only one looking at a label.
How long do seeds last in containers like that? How many years can you store them?
Seeds have a wide variety. And this book, by the way, talks about seed viability. Like, for instance, an onion seed. When you buy onion seeds, their greatest viability is that year. And every year, they lose 50% of their viability. But one of the things I've learned is, well, if half of those sprout, I still have a lot of seed. 5 years from now, there's still a lot. So some of it is I could write on here, you kind of lead into viability testing. I could take 10 seeds or 50 seeds and sprout them and know my viability. And so different seeds, like a bean, I would soak it. You've all done sprouts. You can soak 10 beans and you can say, I have a 70% viability. You see the sprout coming out, and there you go. And you can do the same. A wet paper towel, a lot of these seeds, like a pepper or tomato seed, a plate with a paper towel, or something to keep the humidity high, and then you'll see the sprout coming out. Or you could just put some in some dirt early on in the winter, just to see what that is. But they all have variations in viability. Grains and beans, long time. I mean, they find wheat in tombs that will sprout. So they're long term. And if you think about every time you scrape the ground and the weeds come up, that tells you how seeds are. There are some that will sprout the first year, some that will sprout the second year, and it's sort of nature's form of survival rather than everything sprouting at once. So these beans, I'm unconcerned that this says 2006. I'm confident, and I guess my onion seeds are still in Ecolaca. They haven't quite moved. But again, you get a lot of seeds out of those umbels. You see these beautiful umbels, and I tell you, it's fun to watch the bees on them, because they come and they land. Particularly the big bumblebees, they land and the thing starts waving like this, and then they're all around. And you can have a little stand of onions, and you're watching these umbels going like this, just because the bumblebees are pushing off and landing. And it's really kind of fun to watch them. That's a beekeeper talking, but. So even though there's a reduction of 50% viability in those onions, I know it's a matter of sowing rate. You can sow it down, and onions, I have found that a common way to plant onions is to start them early and transplant the plants. You can sow them in the ground, but you can also transplant plants. You can buy bundles of plants. You can also, buy the sets. But the plants are considered kind of the best thing to plant. So I have grown my onions from seed, and so the fact that there's twice the density of seeds or half the density of seeds in that container, I'm mindful of it, but I don't let that stop me. I don't let that stop me from keeping some seed and just keeping an eye on its viability. So. It's a long answer to your question. So, but just back to this book. I reference this book because I don't remember all the numbers. So I open it up. I look up onion. I go to the allium family, and they tell you They actually have full descriptions of how to do these various seed saving methods. Because I had an overview, and then I went by the book and just played with it. And how deal with pollinating or cross-pollinating, and what the seed viability is, and how many plants to save, and what their distances are of separation if you can do that. So I suggest using the resources. I intentionally brought this hatchet because if you truly have a squash that's really mature, it gets really hard. And in fact, at Seed Savers Exchange, they have these jigs, because of course they are doing large-scale seed preservation. And they have these big things with long lever arms to crack the winter squashes. Because, you know, you need to